afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from here around the globe. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this webinar with Simplilearn America's President Rike, Skills Acquisition versus Talent Acquisition. How to use employee training to save on recruiting costs. Now, talent acquisition is one way to get critical skills in-house, but recruiting is expensive and it can take a long time. And even if you do find a candidate, well, you can't be sure they're necessarily going to fit your culture and stick around. That's why focusing on skills acquisition among your existing employees may be a more cost-effective solution for you and lead to greater employee retention in the long run. Now, Rike is the president of Simplilearn Americas, and he's here to share recent research and insight into how companies are using training to stay ahead of the curve. If you're not familiar with Ray, he's been providing strategic leadership with multiple high-growth companies, including Acolo, HireMojo, Netscape, GE, QRS, Market First, and Accruent. He's got an extensive background in high technology and human resources, and he's here to share his unique insights into both talent acquisition and employee training and the benefits thereof. But before we start, I want to make sure that everybody's hearing us okay and set some expectations for how everything's going to run. So the first thing is, please, if you would, just take a look at your dashboard and see if you can't find that questions field there, a little questions module for you to ask things of us. Let's go ahead and test that out, if you would. Go ahead and type in there and just say hello. Wish Ray well and let him know that you're looking forward to hearing what he's got to say. Maybe tell us where you're joining us from and what's the weather like where you're joining us from? Right now I'm on the west coast of California, and it's about 8:30 at night, and it's been a really incredibly lovely day. But I want to make sure that my audio is going out to all of you who have joined us. So go ahead and drop something in there and let us know, again, in the questions module, not in the chat box, but in the questions module. Ray's presentation is going to run about 40 minutes, and as he moves through that, this question module is going to be your best friend. If there's something that you would like more clarification on, if you want Ray to go back and revisit a slide or go into a little deeper on a particular point, this is where you can drop that in as we're moving forward. And at the end of the actual presentation, we will loop back around and do a complete Q&A from end to end, try to cover everybody's questions. I see Praveen says hello from Hyderabad, India. I hope I pronounced that right. And that's good to know that you all are able to hear us okay. Sometimes GoToWebinar can be a little tricky that way, and I'm just talking to myself. Let's see. Now, if you hear something really tremendous and you want to share it, by the way, on your social channels, of course, please do feel free to do so. Go ahead and tweet any insights or anything that you get out of this to your Twitter or your Facebook or your LinkedIn or what have you. Use the hashtag SLWebinars if you like, and that way your friends and your colleagues will see all the cool stuff you're learning, and they'll get jealous, and maybe they'll join us here next time. Rajiv has joined us from Chennai, and the weather is great, sunny and hot. That's the way I like it too. I am a lizard, and I prefer the warm weather to the cold weather, so I'm a little bit jealous. All right, listen, that's all you need to know from me. We'll have a presentation for 40 minutes or so. Use that questions module to ask your questions as we move through, and after about 40 minutes of presentation, we'll loop around and we'll do all that Q&A. Other than that, I'm going to step back out of the way, and I'm going to let Ray take over. Ray, thank you for joining us.
Chip, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely. It's all yours, my friend.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the audience today. So I did this webinar and presentation a few weeks ago for an audience in the United States, and we received very, very high marks for the interest level, and more importantly, we had several follow-up conversations to learn more about how companies employ a skills acquisition strategy within their organization. So Priyanka from our marketing team in Bangalore asked if I would go ahead and do this presentation for a more global audience, and specifically today, doing it for the audience primarily out of India. So thank you very much for joining us. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about the agenda here. And really, as we go through this, it kind of has been built over 30 years of my career. I spent the first 10 years at the GE company, and I always felt very, very privileged and honored to have an organization that invested so much in my own development through training and skills acquisition. And then over the last 20 years, I've been out here in Silicon Valley, and sometimes moving so fast in the startup world that we kind of step back and say, oh, I need 5 more people who understand AngularJS, or I need 8 people who understand Microsoft Azure. Because we're trying to move so fast, often we actually will hire them from a competitor versus stepping back and saying, how do I really ensure that my employees I have are going to be here 2 years, 5 years down the road? So that's what really created this agenda. So first of all, a lot of organizations really don't understand the total cost of talent acquisition. They think about, oh, I got an internal recruiter, I need to post something on the job board like in Mercury, and I go through maybe an external recruiter for certain hard-to-fill jobs, but they don't really understand the total cost of talent acquisition. We're going to talk a lot more about that. The cost of attrition, the cost of productivity ramps, etc. Second thing we're going to talk more about is how actually investing money in training can actually save your organization. So when that CFO says, why would I invest $300,000 to train those people? Like, why would we waste $3 million by not training those people? So we'll talk a little bit about that. One of the things that's really important in a high-growth economy, and India's experienced that for many years, we've experienced that in Silicon Valley for many, many years, is how do we really get our best and brightest to be here 3 years, 4 years, 5 years out? Because the cost of replacing our A players is very high. How do we actually enhance our employer brand? Especially with the younger generation, the Millennials, they really want to understand, how is that company going to invest in me after I take a job? So that part of your employer branding is critical. Talk a little bit about how you boost profitability, and then give you a kind of almost a skills acquisition for dummies type approach, a 6 steps way to start. So now I'm going to move right into the webinar itself. One of the things I'd like you to think about is something that Paul Savardi said, and you can read it here. But I think this goes to a famous saying that a lot of us need to think about. And the CFO once asked me this. It's like, well, what if we invest all this money in the training that you want and our employees leave? And I kind of looked at him and I said, what if we don't invest in them and they stay? So it's a different way to think about investing in our most important asset, employees, is going to directly impact business productivity. Now, the CEO of AT&T just recently came out and said, for over 300,000 employees around the world, for those employees who don't invest at least 5 to 10 hours a week learning online, they will obsolete themselves with technology. And the World Economic Forum just came out with a very interesting research report about 4 months ago. And they said that 65% of our children who are entering primary school now, when they take their first job after graduating from university, 65% of those jobs don't even exist today. So think about that. 65% of the jobs that kids in primary school today will first take don't even exist today. That just tells you a little bit about the pace with which the global economy is moving and the job market itself. In fact, if you look at the next slide, I think you'd be pretty shocked that just last year, if you look at some of the high growth positions where we have the largest skill gaps on a global basis, we had 28 million jobs across mobile app development, cloud computing, big data, project management, process management like Agile and Scrum. And almost 30% of those jobs, 9 million, went unfilled for greater than 90 days. So if you think about that, if you've got business initiatives, new projects, customer projects which are funding on a professional services basis, if you can't fill those jobs with, external candidates, what are we going to do? And we're here today to tell you that one of the best places to be able to attract these skills are with your current employee base with a skills acquisition strategy. So let me move from here, but once again, think about that. Almost 1/3 of all emerging technology and process jobs went unfilled for greater than 90 days last year. Now, one of the things I mentioned is we're going to talk about the total cost of talent acquisition. So one of the companies that has had a good fortune of running over the last few years was in the talent acquisition space using software to really identify who are the best candidates for particular jobs. But one of the things that I started to realize is it costs a lot more to hire someone than just what you pay for recruiting. So of course, you know, with that, if you use contingency recruiters here in the States, you can pay 20, 25% of first-year salary just to hire someone. But if you really start looking at the total cost, lost productivity of an attrition, someone leaving your company, the length of the time that job is open, the 3 to 6 months to ramp a new employee to full productivity. A recent survey came out that says the total cost to replace a senior or hard-to-fill role can be from 1.5x to 2x of the annual salary. So think about that. If you have someone making the equivalent of 30,000 US dollars in India, the actual total cost to refill that position can be anywhere from 45,000 to 60,000 US dollars, significantly more than 20% of the first year salary. In fact, in another recent report by the Bursting Group within Deloitte, it costs about 4,000 US dollars to fill an average white-collar position here in the US. So as you can see, it's a lot more than just the cost of a recruiter to fill a position. What are some of the things that you have to think about? In fact, we would highly recommend that you really take a total survey of what it costs you to hire each one of your employees. First of all, a lot of the advertising you need to have, whether that's just posting on a job board like Mercury or Indeed, paying the recruiters, getting the recruiters ramped, doing background checks, etc. But then you've got that onboarding, that ramp up productivity. And that's where a lot of companies really don't calculate that cost, because that's not a direct hard cost, but it's a soft productivity loss cost. But we ask you and your finance department to really try to understand how much productivity do we lose. Now, in certain roles, like a sales role, it's really easy. If you've got a sales position open for 3 months and another 3 months to ramp a new employee, that's really easy. In a IT services, professional services organization, at a certain billing rate, if you've got an empty position or the person's on the, once they get ramped, they're on the bench for 30, 40% of the time, just as easy to calculate that. And then also, one of the other things that's really hard to understand is, what's the cost of lost engagement? Once again, that employee who's not working at his or her utmost potential. They're kind of taking a little bit of time to go out and look at the job boards and seek another job. And they're taking a little bit more time off to go to the interviews because they don't feel that they're being invested in by your organization. And then the real cost of a talent acquisition strategy versus a skills acquisition strategy can be viewed in this last data point. 33% of senior or hard-to-fill positions that are filled with an external candidate using recruiting and talent acquisition will leave within the first 6 months. And a boss once told me a saying that I really never forgot, and that is, we hire people for what they are. They are a Java developer. They are a Hadoop architect. So we hire them for what they are, and we fire them for who they are, because they don't share the company values, or they don't align with the personality attributes of our organization. So if you have great employees who already understand your business, fit into your culture, share your values, it's a much more prudent investment to invest in filling the skill gaps by upskilling and reskilling them versus going to the outside world and just trying to hire that talent from the outside. Now, the other thing to think about, and this actually comes from the Bursting Group also, is an employee's value accelerates in a nonlinear model as they have more and more time in your organization. In fact, that first 12 to 18 months, that's the investment zone. That's when you hire them, you onboard them, you train them. They're not really providing a positive return on investment yet to the organization as measured by output. It's only after they hit that return zone, which is often 18 to 24 months out, that you start seeing that exponential growth and return on investment of that talent acquisition dollar. So whatever we can do to retain that employee for 24, 36, 48 months, they're going to have and add much more economic value to our organization. Once again, you can read a lot more about this in the Bershon report of 2013. So to summarize on how training investments save your money versus talent acquisition, remember that 1.5 to 2x of annual salary is what it's really going to cost you in direct costs and productivity costs for those hard-to-fill IT emerging technology jobs. So let's talk a little bit more about employee retention. In fact, you can read these bullet points. I'm not going to read it to you, but there was a recent survey done by the Corporate Executive Board, and a data point jumped out at me that I wanted to share today, and that is 89% of people who view their organizations as investing in their career development through training are more likely to stay at that company. 89%. So that's a huge number of why you want to invest in skills acquisition strategy. The other thing you want to think about is 40% of employees who receive poor training in their first year are much more likely to leave their positions. So there's a lot of data points that say invest in your employees and they will invest back in you. And in today's fast-growing emerging technology world and more millennials coming to the workforce, this is another thing that really jumped out at me. And that was in a Dice.com salary, and Dice is one of the leading job posting sites for the tech industry. 2/3 of IT workers or digital workers believe they could find a better job in less than 60 days if they only took the time to look. So what we want to do as an organization is by investing in a skills acquisition on a continuous process with our employees, not even to make them for a day think that they want to look for a different job. Let's keep them fully engaged. The other thing, and maybe a little bit more in the United States than in India, but we've created a real issue with the millennials coming out of university today, and that is for the last 18 years, the baby booming generation have done everything for their kids, from what primary school should you go to what high school, to driving them to all the events, to all their programs. So a lot of these millennials really aren't used to, I got to figure it out for myself. The only way I'm going to get ahead is by working harder than the next person. So they now believe it's management's job in the workforce to provide them with accelerated development opportunities. I don't know how many times over the last couple of years I've had that millennial who's worked 6-9 months in their existing role will come to me and say, well, I think I'm ready to be a director now. And once again, it's not like that in all parts of the world, and it's definitely not like that in India yet. But we're starting to see a much more entitled workforce in their 20s, and they are going to demand that we as an organization continue to invest to upskill them. So even though they may be more valuable to the outside world, they're definitely going to be more valuable to you. A little bit more data. This is from SHRM, and SHRM is a Society for Human Resource Professionals. And it's more data out there that says 42, so almost 1/2 of employees are rating job training as very important. On a 1 to 5 scale, very important being the highest. But only a quarter, 25%, are satisfied with the amount of training they're receiving. So you can see the mismatch between expectations of getting great training and what they're actually receiving today. So just more data to say, the more you invest in your employees, the better served you're going to be. Now, the other thing, as global marketplaces are growing so fast, one of the things we want to always think about is how do I enhance my employer brand? employer brands is a combination of major things, but one of those things is if you get the reputation for hiring not only great people out of university, but also investing with applied learning and on-the-job training opportunities, people will start flocking to your organization because you have a much higher level of employee engagement, and people will start thinking about their career path, not outside of your organization, but their career path in concert with the continuous learning journey within your organization. The other thing that's really interesting, and this came from another bursary report, is only about 50% of employees today would recommend to their friends and colleagues that their company as a destination workplace. So anything that we can do by investing in training and helping our employees acquire skills that will help them achieve their career goals is going to have a direct result on your employee brand and employee engagement. Chip, I'm going to take a break here and see if we have any questions yet.
Hey, Ray. Well, let's take a quick look here. One of the comments is, you mentioned 2/3 of workers think that they could find a better job in less than 90 days. Does that square with that 90-ish day period that you quoted for filling skilled, hard-to-fill positions? In other words, are those 2/3 of workers right that they could run out and find a job in that period of time, or are they being overly optimistic about the marketability of their skills?
No, in fact, those two data points are in direct harmony. So let me explain that. So I'm a iOS developer, and I know if I go out, there's 1 million iOS jobs right now posted on websites that I could get a job in less than 60 days. On the flip side, as an employer, I'm fighting 1 million other companies to hire iOS developers. So for me to get my job opportunity in front of a potential employee is very hard because there's so much noise. So the reason it takes longer than 90 days to fill the job is because I'm competing against thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of other companies. So there's a direct correlation to I, as a candidate, can get a job quickly, but I, as the employer, are going to have a harder time filling those hard-to-fill positions where there's more demand for that job than there is candidate supply.
That makes good
question,
sense.
Chip. Any others right now?
Let's do one more before you jump back in. Yeah. So someone here is saying that if I'm a team leader and I understand the value of providing training to my people, how do I get management focused on that importance of that training? I presume that means people up the food chain from them who might have to sign off on the acquisition and implementation of a training program. How can a team leader get upper management or C-suite buy-in to the value of the training so that they can bring it to their teams?
Well, that question is going to go right to step 5 of the 6-step hint I'm going to give you, and that is how do you really measure the results of your training investment? So I'm going to cover that a little bit, Chip, but let me just say that if you're measuring return on investment of training by how many employees finish the training, you're not going to get executive support. It's how do you measure the impact on the job of the competencies and skills acquired during that training. I'll talk more about that in about 10 minutes. But it's a great question because you need to determine how do I measure the productivity of my function. Let's say that is a developer. It might be what's the bug rate in the code that I did after training versus before. Or maybe it's investing in Agile and Scrum methodology, and today you can actually deliver 20% more feature function that's relevant in the same time than it took 4 or 5 months ago. But you need to think about how do you measure the productivity of your function and do a benchmark before you invest in the training and then measure it afterwards and see if you're really getting return on investment. So Chip, if there's no more questions right now, I think I'm going to just move forward, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, so here's some more data. And once again, to the person who asked the question about how do I convince my leadership that I need to invest in training, you're going to have access to this presentation after the webinar today. And we've also actually written a white paper on skills acquisition. And some of this data coming from multiple credible sources is irrefutable. Some of the things you'll see here is things like 52% more productive. IBM recently conducted a survey of project performance, and they measured the percent of projects that were delivered on time before they invested in PMP training for their project managers and afterwards. And what IBM found was they had an 84% increase in projects being delivered on time when they were ran by a PMP, PMI certified project manager versus without a PMP, PMI certified project manager. And that is a 2013 report from IBM. So my recommendation to everyone on the phone is the more you can use data points that are validated by independent third parties of the return on investment for training, the quicker you're going to get your executive of your department, the CFO, to buy into that. So let's get into that six-step idea of how to implement a skills acquisition strategy. So the first thing, and I think this is critical, and it also helps senior executives say, you know what, you're right, we do need to invest in training and having a skills acquisition strategy. How can you benchmark where do you have skill gaps today? Now, a lot of times you might know that you have a new project that's with a big client, you need 28 cybersecurity people, and you only got 6 people who are on the bench. So sometimes it's really easy. Now, the other thing we would recommend is how do you do a pre-assessment? One pre-assessment might be you look at external certification exams and have employees actually go and try to get that certification and identify whether there is or is not a skills gap. You might be able to do it through simple survey techniques. Maybe you're looking for someone who really understands social media marketing. And there's organizations like OMCP, which is one of the world's leading digital marketing certification providers, that you can actually do a quick assessment through a series of quizzes to see where there's deficiencies. So first of all is make sure that you do some type of skills gaps analysis. And also, first of all, look at what skill sets in my current organization can best be enhanced and upskilled to achieve that. One might be you have Java developers. If you have Java developers, but you're doing a huge new UI UX project, they are probably best positioned to help you do your new UX development using AngularJS. So always look at kind of career pathing and the most tangential skills that can be enhanced through upskilling and reskilling. Step 2, what are those goals for training? And this is where, as that team lead, don't just talk about employee engagement, employee retention, etc. What are the specific key performance indicators that you can measure before and after training? So really align your training and the skills achieved to your strategic business objectives. One of the easy things today in most organizations, especially industrial companies, is they're going through digital transformation initiatives. So how do you equate investing in cloud developers or cloud architects into your digital transformation measurements? So the more you can align it to their strategic objectives, the better. Now, one of the other ways that we believe that a lot of companies are assessing the needs for skills assessment is through external certifications. An example might be, hey, I just implemented Salesforce.com and I need 52 developers for the Force.com development environment. Well, that means I need to get people who are Salesforce developer Category 1 certified. So one of the things you might want to think about is certification as a great goal. The other thing that we found is just having a common language of a new emerging technology or business initiative can be of great value. We had one technology company that recently said, we want all 5,000 of our marketers around the world to have one common language of digital marketing. So when someone talks about conversion optimization here, you know what that means, whether they're an SEO resource or a paid search resource or a social media marketing resource. So training cannot always be a quantitative, it can be more of a qualitative, such as developing that common language of business in a particular function. So third step, if you want to implement a continuous and robust learning program, really choose the right training partner. And one of the things that we found is no one training delivery model is going to reach every employee and learner type. What does that mean? So just going to MOOC and getting great developer training from MIT may not be the way some developers learn. Some developers may learn with more of an instructor-led, with labs and applied learning opportunities. So really look at training partners that can provide different training delivery models that address the largest number of constituents in your organization. The other thing that's really important with training is don't just provide a monologue. You listen to these 18 hours of training and do a couple projects, and you'll be fine. The more you can actually provide applied learning opportunities specific to your business, the better. An example, maybe you're going to be teaching people about Agile Scrum. Then what we would recommend is have a simulation that allows you to have both developers and product managers actually looking at user stories and how would they point those, and then see how the product manager use story points versus the product development resource. So once again, choosing the right training partner can provide you a lot of best practices and different ways to reach the largest target audience in your company. Step number 4, and this is critical, and this is where that senior executive support is going to be so important, and that is, what are the incentives for employees who are working 40, 50 hours a week, who don't have time to take 1.5, 3 hours of training? Why are they going to do it? Well, number one, if a key executive says, this is critical to the organization because we're going to make sure that we have the highest employee engagement and career path opportunity of any of our competitors. We're going to do that through a continuous learning opportunity. Or, as in Microsoft's case, which is one of our clients, and excuse me, I'm going to take a water here. The chief marketing officer actually created a training initiative that resulted in an internal digital marketing certification. And every marketing leader around the world knew that they needed to promote people first who received the Microsoft digital marketing certification. So once again, an example where there was a huge incentive for students completing that training. Even things like gamification and badges for the people who complete the training first, for the people who do the applied learning and have projects that they apply with peer reviews to get the highest peer review scores. But there's many different ways. Even things like gift cards, that $5 Starbucks card, just rewarding people for completing self-directed learning. All those can be a great way to build a culture of continuous learning and employees investing in their own career growth. Now, once again, this is a little bit more of a U.S.-centric slide, but a lot of times countries, states, provinces will have tax advantages and corporate incentives for investing in employee training. So for your local jurisdiction, see if there are any of those tax credits or incentives for investing in your employees through training initiatives. We talked a lot about measuring training results, and this goes back to the question that was asked earlier, Chip. So, number one, you do want to see what the learner engagement and satisfaction was, but those are just level 1 measurements of return on investment for training. But go ahead and do a Net Promoter Score. See how many advocates you have for the training that you deliver internally versus how many people are more passive about it or net detractors. The second thing is, what did they really learn, and what's their ability to actually apply that? So one of the things we would say for every training program you ever implement in your organization, make sure there's a final assessment. It's a little bit like if you went to school, sat through 10 weeks of classes, and never had a test, how would you ever prove that you retained and understand the curriculum? Same thing in corporate training. Either have internal assessments or align your training to external certifications where they actually have to take the exams. And then the third thing you want to do is make sure that when they go back, when your employee goes back on the job, how are we going to measure that they're actually applying what they learned on the job? The best way to do that is, number one, with objectives that tie specifically to applying your project, and of course having key performance indicators and benchmarks before and post training. And then the last thing is really look at this as a multi-year return on investment analysis. And that is for the employees who took the training and scored the highest or were best able to improve their performance reviews year over year, look at those people 2, 3, 4, 5 years out and start collecting data on where did my directors or senior directors or VPs come from as it relates to the training initiatives they participated in and how they did. And then step 6 is really about make sure you have a culture of promote from within and that incents and provides opportunities for that continuous learning culture. One of the ways to do that is as you do succession planning across every category, go and talk to those 2 or 3 key people for that role about what type of training they would like. How would they like to enhance their skill set? And just always create that culture of a continuous learning environment. The other thing that you want to do is help guide your workforce with which new skills they should develop. So one of the things you might say is, we're looking at emerging technologies. We really want to invest in a big data initiative over the next 12 to 18 months. We'd like people to step up and volunteer to go and spend X hours per week on enhancing their web analytics skills, digital analytics, and big data. Maybe it's a Duke training. But I'm just giving examples. The more you can incent and have people think 12, 18, 24 months out and provide them the infrastructure and the platform for self-directed, self-selected training, the better off you'll be in the long term. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. One of the things I would like to say, and what we found a lot of, I'm a frontline manager. I don't really have a very strong training and development or learning department. What do you expect from me? How am I going to train my employees? Well, number one, there's always the strategic option of outsourcing training. And outsourcing takes many different shapes. It can be just finding a great e-learning aggregation or marketplace and providing $100 per month or $200 per year stipend for people to take those e-learning courses. In today's kind of online learning, whether that's e-learning or instructor-led live virtual classrooms, employees have the opportunity to take training before they come to work, after work, on weekends, provide them every opportunity to take their free time and apply it towards bettering themselves. And the other thing about any training you do, try never to invest $1 in training unless there's an applied learning and on-the-job opportunity to immediately apply what they learned in class or online to the real-world projects. In fact, one of the things I saw the other day was 75% of people who get trained do not apply what they learned in training for 6 months or more. And you can probably imagine the efficacy and ability to recall that if you're not applying newly received skills for 6 months or greater. So with that, Chip, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I'd like to see if there's any last-minute questions, and then I'll do a quick summary at the end.
All right. There are a few questions here queued up, and we've still got some time before the end of our allotted time slot. Before we do that, though, if you don't mind, and if everybody who's joined us doesn't mind, I'm going to take care of what I like to call my contractually obligated screen takeover. I'm going to launch a little poll here really quickly and take over your screen there, Ray. So I've done that, and I've got a poll up on the screen. Just to let you all know, this webinar, of course, is free to anyone to join us, and we're happy to have you here. It's a public-facing webinar. You don't have to already be a client or a student with Simplilearn. But we do think it's important for you to know that there are a lot of trainings that we, in fact, can provide for your teams. We provide training across a variety of disciplines as a business and technology training provider, 400 web-based training courses in our system across a wide spectrum of skill sets, including things like digital marketing and project management and programming and so forth. And these courses are accredited by more than 30 third-party certifying bodies, like Prince2, PMI, OMCP, the Open Group, and so forth. Our trainings are specifically designed to prepare your teams for those certification exams from those third-party providers based on the very latest bodies of knowledge that those organizations require. All of these courses are designed and presented by our faculty of experienced professional trainers. So when your folks, when your teams, when your employees and your team members, they join these training programs, they get structured courses, they get information and resources, hands-on practical experience. In some cases, they get lab exercises and simulation exams, access to platforms where they get software for running experiments and doing practice projects, and more. If you'd like to know more about what we can offer you, tick the appropriate box, and we will have somebody get in touch with you to answer all your questions and help set a plan that's appropriate for your goals for your team. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Thanks for indulging me. Make that go away, and Ray, it'll revert back to your screen here real quickly, I think. Come on, go to webinar, catch up with me. There we go. So we're seeing your thank you screen, and folks have that contact information showing there as well. Okay, let's take a look at questions, and let's scroll back here. So this goes to needs assessment. The question is, I imagine I need to do needs assessment across my team to establish who needs what kind of training the most. Do you have any best practice tips for me to accurately establish the training my team needs and that I should invest in? Ooh, Ray, are you with me? Uh-oh.
I am. So I have three different
there we go. All right.
Sorry, my mute button got stuck.
No problem.
One is, it's very easy with today's survey technology. Just look at the key projects you have going on within your function and the requisite skills that you believe are needed to execute those projects, and do a survey of your employees that would be responsible for that, and ask them for a self-assessment on where their skills range on a 1 to 5 scale, from don't need it, I really need skills, to I have it and I'm an expert at that. And do a skills inventory just with using survey tools. There's one. Very simple to do. You can do it yourself. Number 2, as I mentioned earlier, look at third-party certifications that can quantitatively determine whether you do or do not have the requisite skills within your current team. So let's say that is Salesforce administration skills, a real easy one, right? Go ahead and have them apply and take the Salesforce Administrator 1 test. And you'll very quickly understand whether you do or do not have the appropriate skill gaps. And number 3 is there are certification bodies out there. The one that I would give you in digital marketing, such as OMCP, they actually will provide a pre-assessment capability for people to determine whether they could actually gain a certification, whether that's an OMCA, which is an Online Marketing Certified Associate, or an Online Marketing Certified Professional. So those are my 3 hints. But I think the most important thing is most employees know if they have the requisite skill sets they have to fulfill their career path goals. So I think by going out and speaking to each employee where they want to be in 2 to 3 years and seeing where they have self-identified the largest need for skill acquisition, that's a wonderful approach as well.
I really like that last little addendum that you had there of going to the team and not just saying, I think you're lacking in this area and I want you to take this training, but tying it to where they see themselves down the line. They're going to feel so much more invested in if they get to be a part of that process. I think that sounds really key. All right, let's see. Another question here for you. How do we make time for training in our team's schedules without impacting their primary tasks negatively? Training takes time. Are you suggesting that we make training, quote unquote, part of the job on which they get to spend X percentage of their on-the-clock time? And if so, what would be the appropriate percentage that I could defend?
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, each organizational culture is different. I mean, Google used to give 20% of a person's time for them to pursue their own pet project, right? Because they knew that that would be a great creative way to get new ideas inside of Google. But what we're finding is most organizations, the most they will, an employee says they have time per week is 1.5 to 3 hours. So first of all, I would strongly encourage you to look at 1.5 hours as a benchmark. The other thing that we found, which has worked really well to build a culture of kind of continuous learning and team-based learning, is to do things like lunch and learns. So one best practice we've seen is we actually saw a team that would get together for lunch once a week for an hour and a half. People, the company would bring in lunch, and they would watch a e-learning video on a specific topic of the week or topic of the month. So they would watch it together, and then after they watched it, they would spend about 15 minutes actually discussing what they saw and how it could be applied in their department. Now, you can take that and do it on a much more structured basis. We've had one company that took one of our e-learning courses. It was about 12 hours of video learning, and they asked people to do that for 8 weeks, 1.5 hours. And then on the 9th week, they had a 2-hour workshop where they actually brought in the instructor on the e-learning video and gave the students the opportunity to ask him directly, hey, on the second week of the videos, we watched this, and I got this issue. What do you think? How should I approach it? So those are a couple different examples.
That's perfect. I really love that idea of the lunch and learns. And you know, if they're applying what they're learning over the course of the weeks to in-house real-world challenges that affect the bottom line of the business, maybe having them take a few minutes too to talk about, okay, last week we watched video X, and then over the course of the past week I've been applying these ideas, and here's a success story, so that everybody can see too how not only are they learning it, but they're applying it, and it's positively impacting the company. I like that a lot. All right, let's see. I've read that tougher training actually leads to higher completion and retention rates. In other words, the harder the training, the more likely they'll finish. That feels counterintuitive. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. I've not heard that before, nor have we experienced that. However, I think a parallel that we have seen is the more academically structured the curriculum is, with quizzes, self-assessments, a final assessment, and some level of applied-based learning, you're going to see much greater increased competency and retention. Now, the number one factor we've seen that leads to completion of a training program is executive sponsorship with a real incentive tied to that. Now, we also see organizations that have mandates, and there's more punitive issues if you don't complete training, but we find that the best in class organizations provide executive sponsorship and incentives to complete the training.
That makes sense, and I suspect that when people talk about tougher training, that that probably means exactly what you're talking about. Training that is not just a sit and watch videos training, some aggregation of a bunch of streaming video with no structure, but rather
Yeah.
tougher training applies to things like, as you said, the quizzes and the tests to make it a little more challenging.
Yeah, there's,
So,
Chip, there's a school of thought out there today all about micro-learning. And micro-learning is, there's 5 to 10-minute videos, tips and tricks, how to. And those serve a purpose, but it really is not going to lead to increased competency and proficiency on the job.
I would agree, given what experience I've had as well. That the tips and tricks stuff is not as rigorous, for lack of a better word, perhaps,
Yeah, I know.
as the other.
Yeah, when I took differential equations in engineering school, I didn't get to just look at it for 5 minutes and never be able to apply it, right? I went through hours and hours of homework and hundreds of problems to make sure I could actually do differential equations.
There you go, practical applications. That might dovetail into this next question, which is and you spoke about this a little bit towards the end of the presentation, but maybe we can put a finer point on it. The comment here is, obviously relapse is a problem for many training programs. Learners might cram to pass certifications, but may not actually retain what they learn. What are good practices for managers to minimize relapse on their teams after training?
Well, this is where the applied learning opportunities need to be defined up front. And applied learning is not just during the training itself, but after the training. So I'll give you one simple example. In one organization that went through training, everyone had to identify a real-world project and present what they were going to do with the new skills they actually had learned. And if there was an investment required to do that, they also pitched for the investment. And they did that in a peer review environment. And the team that was viewed as having the best recommendation actually received the funding to go and apply these new skills in a real-world project. Now, not everyone's going to have that luxury, but the more you can pre-plan how are we going to apply those skills on the job afterwards, the better. Now, with soft skills, that's a little bit harder, but with hard skills, if we're going to train 50 people on Cloudera developer, most likely you're going to have a real-world project that they're going to apply those skills on within a month or two.
Very good. Yeah, I can see how that would definitely keep people's new skills top of mind, and keep them sort of right on the edge of the best retention, and really reduce that relapse issue. Let's see here. Do you have any tips for incentivizing trainees? You mentioned in the presentation incentivization a little bit, and that works better than punitive approaches. Do you have experience in working with the clients that you've interacted with? How best to incentivize trainees to really make the time and to take the training seriously?
Well, one of the best approaches is definitely tying training to career advancement. Right? If you go through this training and exhibit the ability to apply the new skills and competencies on the job, that'll be a key criteria for advancement and promotion. So I think nothing trumps that. Learning path equals career path. Number two, there can be small, both financial incentives or team-based incentives, such as, for a day off. If you apply these new skills and deliver this project on time, then you get a $100 bonus or a day off with the team. So I would look at any type of incentives and rewards program your organization has outside of career advancement.
Very good. I hope that answered the question for our guest here. We're about towards the end of the hour, and I know you had a kind of a wrap-up that you wanted to hit, and one of the things I think we should remind everyone again, I think you mentioned that the slide deck was going to be available, so if that's the case, be sure and let us know how they can get a hold of that. And I'll just say that the one thing that you said, not the one thing, you said a lot of things that I found really interesting, but something that really struck me was that passage where you talked about creating this pool of most promotable employees and having that key man / succession planning in place. It's just really interesting to me to think about, you know, your people and your teams almost like a chess game with a long-range plan for nurturing and evolving them into an optimal team. What does your optimal team look like 24 to 36 months down the line, and how can I use and evolve and nurture the people that I have to get them there? I really like that long-range thinking. That struck me.
I'll go back to an aspirational goal for your organization, for everybody still on the webinar. And this really struck me at GE, and I still feel so privileged to have been at GE. But we went into this one training program, and the instructor said, look around. And of the 4 people that you see around you, 2 of those will not be here in 12 months. And we're still investing, and this was a kind of a leadership training, so they were investing about $25,000 to each of us. And the company had so much foresight into both the value of the training and whether people were going to be able to apply it and achieve that next level of promotion, that they said, we know 50% of you won't be here in 12 months, but we're still going to invest in you, because that's where we're going to have the employees who do stay to be the best and brightest in the industry. So the one thing I'll leave you with is making things appear to be so valuable and almost a scarce commodity. You're going to have people clamoring to not only get trained, but to show you how they're applying that training. So Chip, with that, if there's no more questions, I'm going to sign off. I'm going to thank everyone for attending. Everyone who did register and attended, through the wonders of marketing automation, you will be receiving an email with a link to this presentation, and you also will be invited to go to the recorded version of this if you'd like to share it with anyone else within your organization. With that, Chip, thank you very much for the time, and I'll let you wrap up.
All right. Thank you, Ray, for being here and sharing all of that insight. Very, very much appreciated. For those of you folks that have stuck with us to the end here, we sure appreciate you being here with us. Take a look at your chat window really quickly. I just shared a few links with you. One of them is to the upcoming enterprise webinars page at Simplilearn. The other one is just in general, the upcoming webinars and resources over on the Simplilearn page, website, in what we call our Career Edge section. So as you dig around in there, you'll find you can filter and sort by topic and skill set, and you'll come across a lot of different articles and white papers and case studies and upcoming webinars and all kinds of interesting things there. And lastly, if you're interested, a link to the Simplilearn YouTube channel, where you're welcome, obviously, to go over there and take a look, dig around. You'll find some interesting resources there as well. And I recommend that you subscribe so that you'll be notified when new videos are added to the channel. I think that takes us right up to the end of the hour. So thank you, everybody, for being here and joining us, taking time out of your day wherever you are, whether it was in the middle of your work day or taking time out of your personal time in the evening away from your family to sit down with us tonight. We really, really appreciate you being here, and we welcome you the next time around. And until then, thanks, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chip. Bye-bye.